All right.
So, welcome everybody. Steve Hassan here, and I'm here with Steve Guziec, who actually I'm in Boston and he's in Illinois. I welcome this opportunity, Steve, to talk with you and to help share some of your incredible story,
Sure.
and which includes you, if I remember correctly, correct my memory, you contacted me years ago when you were in graduate school, um, saying, "Hey, Steve, I was raised in the Jehovah's Witnesses, and I've decided, and I've been in the corporate world for a long time, but I really want to become a mental health professional and help other people who've been involved with destructive groups. What do you advise?" Or,
Yeah.
I'm reading your book and, whatever. And then you recontacted me, I guess, last year and said, "Hey, I've graduated and I'm licensed, you know,
Yep.
right?" And so
Yeah.
I'm going to turn it over to you to just share a little bit of your journey, which is incredibly fascinating to me. And honestly, I think there are millions of people who are born in groups like the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Latter-day Saints, other groups that are, fringe Christian churches and other political organizations that fulfill the criteria of undue influence. So, first of all, you're in Illinois. Where in Illinois?
So I live about 90 miles west of Chicago in a small little town called Sycamore.
Uh-huh.
Uh,
And you're
and
married and you have a little
yeah,
girl.
we have a 2-year-old daughter.
Yeah.
My wife and I we met at the business that I was fired from when I was a Jehovah's Witness. We say it was love at first latte because it was a coffee company and we manufactured espresso machines. So yeah, we have a daughter. She has her MBA, and she has her own small little marketing company, and we kind of just tag team different work efforts, and then just kind of the whole process of going through undergrad. Like when I contacted you, I was an undergrad, and I was trying to unravel the mystery of how to become, how to help somebody, because I had a great teacher who basically, after I found your book, I was on a business trip in Minnesota and I was in this small little bookstore, and I was like, "Oh, I've heard of this guy before. Let me read this book." And I like underlined pretty much the whole thing, and was like, "Oh my God, how did you have a mirror in my life?" And shortly after there, I contacted you. Was like, "Hey, I want to do this because my world religion teacher was like, you should really help people." After I was explaining to him every Saturday, like, this is a phobia, this is indoctrination, this is so common. He's like, "Well, why don't you help people?" I'm like, I have no idea how. And so I emailed you, was like, "Hey, is there a specific graduate program that will help cult victims?" And and luckily you were like nice enough to be like, "No."
I wish that's what we're
Right.
hoping to
Right.
develop, really, is a training program to help educate people who want to help other people. But let's go back. There's so many fascinating aspects to your story, and we're not going to be able to cover it all in this one video, so we'll do more. And
Sure.
then hopefully we'll have some webinars in the near future that people can tune into and learn more from you and your firsthand experience. And I just want to state again, for anyone who hasn't heard my story, I'm a relatively short-term cult member. Like, I was recruited at 19 and only was in 2.5 years when I fell asleep at the wheel, and then my family hired people to intervene with me and deprogram me. So, and I got out 40 years ago, and unlike me, you were raised in it. And how many years ago did you leave? What year did you?
So I left in 2007,
Mm-hmm.
um, 2008. I left, but then didn't get the official kicked out until the following year. Yeah, but I was born into the group. My mom was pregnant with me when she was baptized into the group. So I always told people I was baptized 1.5 times. So I must be extra blessed by God.
Right.
But you know,
Sure, I'll buy that. Yeah. So, yeah, tell us a bit of what you want to share of your story,
sure.
your profound
Yeah.
story.
So I'm one of four boys. I'm the second oldest. We were all born into the group. My parents joined right as I was, still in the womb. My dad joined a few years later after being love bombed, of course.
Yeah, so
And
I'm going to interrupt you. Forgive me, but I'll just interrupt you for a second and say I always have a little when I hear people talk about joining because groups like the Jehovah's Witnesses don't give people informed consent. So, in my opinion, they are deceptively recruited versus joining. And in
yeah,
particular, I just want to say one more thing and get back to your story that a lot of people don't understand that the Bible, that the Watchtower knocks on people's door, the New World Translation, is their own version of the New Testament that is not accepted by any Christian theologian or Jewish theologian as valid. So
yep,
they say they want to study the Bible, but what they're not saying, because they don't even understand it themselves, because they're victims, that they're really being recruited into a destructive group. So
yeah.
forgive me for interrupting. So
No,
they got recruited.
right, they got
Right.
recruited, and I think that just shows the point of it. Like, there's still things, even though after I've been out for almost 10 years, it's still. But so they were recruited when back in the 80s, and then they stayed in. My dad became an elder, which is kind of a leader in the group. My mom was, a stay-at-home mom, took care of us. We were all, raised with the intent that, we weren't going to graduate high school because, the world was going to come. So schooling was never really a high priority. It was, kingdom interests, aka Jehovah's Witness propaganda, preaching and ministering, and trying to recruit our neighbors. And then, came, anything else, but that was a real top priority. So,
And you were baptized in the group, I assume.
Yep. Yeah, so when I was, I want to say I was 13 or 14. I was a freshman in high school when I was baptized. I wanted to get baptized when I was in junior high, but my parents wanted me to get to high school first, which is uncommon. Nowadays, it's common more for children to be baptized as young as 7 or 8 into
Which
the group.
is so absurd and upsetting to me.
Especially since it comes with responsibility that no child can actually,
Yeah,
know.
that's another point I just want to insert. Forgive me, but my experience, because I've helped many people from the Watchtower and other groups like it. It's like they rob the children of their childhoods because of this installation of phobias about Armageddon and this rigidity, and the kids are hit even and corporally punished if they don't act adult. And instead of kids fidget, and kids shouldn't be expected to sit at a long, boring, service. But they're trained to become like little adults, and they're robbed of their spontaneity and their childhood. So forgive me for cutting in again.
No, and that was
That was your childhood.
Yeah, 3 days a week. It was the theocratic ministry school, which was 2 hours, and then you had the Bible study at the book study, what they would call it, on the other night, and then we had Sunday. And then you had to minister at least 10 to 20 hours a month, and so that didn't really leave a lot of time for school activities or anything of that nature, and making friends outside of there. So
when you say minister, do you mean publishing, like going door to door and like recruiting, basically?
Yep.
What the Moonies called witnessing, and other groups called witnessing.
Yeah. Usually it was Saturday morning, so most kids were just waking up to watch Saturday morning cartoons. We were waking up to put on our suit and ties and go out and knock on our neighbor's door. And typically it was, I had fun in service or witnessing work, whatever anyone, there's a couple terms that they used. Just from a social aspect, I really enjoyed just hanging out with people and talking with people. I didn't mind talking to people at the door, but I always felt awkward trying to force this onto them. But then, at the same point, I remember one time walking away from a door, and an older member was with me, and the lady had slammed the door, and he's like, "We'll be back, to bury her corpse and take over her house after Armageddon comes." And I'm like,
yeah, very loving and compassionate. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
So let's move forward with some
Sure.
of the key elements that you'd like to share in this video.
Yeah. So born in the group, and then I got married into the group. And my first wife, we're not married anymore. We started going through some rough times with her. Her brother was being appointed to be a active elder, which is you'll be a leader, be interacting with kids, but he had molested her as a child, and I was like, I'm not really cool with that because sexual abuse, is kind of, there's some iffy grounds on that with you being a leader and being in a position of authority over children. I really don't think he should be in that. I'm like, or at least he should be talked to, and the other members should know about that. And basically, after months and months of me writing letters, arguing back and forth, they were like, shut up or we'll kick you out. And so I was just really uneasy by that, but I stayed in. I was like, it's, God still loves me and I'll still, it's his direction. But that kind of started the whole process of like really what's going on. And then soon after that, my wife and I got divorced, which is against the rules. I was given the, either stay together with my wife or be kicked out. And so I said, bye. I'll see you later, which was empowering and it felt great. But then subsequently after that, it kind of took a little bit of a dip because I worked for a company that was run by Jehovah's Witnesses, and they fired me because they were like, well, if you left Jehovah, how could we trust you? And I'm like, that has nothing to do with work. I've never lied. I've never stolen. I've never done anything. My sales are on the incline, on an increase.
Right.
And they're like, nope, we're gonna fire you. It's effective immediately. And so, which, I was like, okay, fine, I'll go, to one of the competitors. Or I'll go to somewhere else in the industry because we're in a small industry, the specialty coffee. And it took me almost a year because it turns out every potential employer was calling. They were bad mouthing me, telling me it's illegal here in Illinois to say anything other than time of employment, salary, and then if they would hire me again. So I ended up having to have my uncle, who's never been a member, as most of my family was at one point or another. He's a lawyer, so he's like, yeah, I'll call them and let's see what's going on. And so he called them, and the VP started telling all these lies, and so he's like, I'm going to stop you. I'm representing Steve Guziec. He's a client, and what you just said is illegal, and we're going to send a cease and desist letter to you and then the corporation out in Italy. So finally, after that, I was able to finally get a job and get back into the cycle of rebuilding it. But in between then, it was a really rough period. I went through depression. I tried finding a mental health professional to help me, and it was really hard to find one. I had two that invited me to their church. One told me to get over it, and the other one told me to go back to the group, because it's a social support, and it's everything that was wrong was told me.
By ignorant mental health professionals
Yep.
who had good intentions, but they didn't know what the heck they were talking about.
Yeah.
But I just want to highlight just how egregious it is that you were kicked out of this organization for trying to protect children from being abused by a known abuser who was being elevated to a position of authority. And then they're firing you for no reason other than you're no longer a true believer. And not only that, they're bad-mouthing you. They're making up false claims that you're a bad person and can't do a good job. It's so wrong on so many levels. So it's fair to say you went through a depression, or you felt really the typical symptoms that I know that you now know are the typical symptoms. Can you name a few things that you went through yourself and recovered from?
I think the biggest thing is a few weeks after being fired, having my best friend tell me, well, you're dead to me, call me when you come back, and losing all of my support structure, all my friends and all my, family that were in there. It was, I attempted to take my own life, and luckily it was failed, but after that, the suicidal ideation and the feelings of being alone were tremendous. And I think the depression that I went through was also spurred by, going and not being able to have a social support network where I was able to go to my friends that had been with me for, years, um, and kind of understanding, what I had been through. And no one really, like, when I'd talk or I'd vent to like some new friends I made, that, kind of be like, oh, that sounds a little weird, but, why didn't you just, wake up? Or, it was like the fault was then put back onto me, like
Right.
I was dumb or I was gullible. And really, that's not the case. And especially now that I've educated myself and I know the process, and it's, you're victimized by these groups.
Right, and I want to just intercept, if I interrupt one more second, and just say that for me, having worked with so many people, it's hard to convey the depths of what it feels like for someone who is in an institution, in this group, they believe they're following God, and then to be told, you're out, you're not good enough, you're not saved. And to have your whole family and friends, your whole network, your entire reality turn against you and more or less say, conform and we'll let you back in. Like, shut off your conscience, shut off your critical thinking, and just, become a droid. Or, what the heck? What do I do now? And what is reality? And who am I? And where do I fit? And I think when you described, and I've heard from many other former witnesses who read Combating, it was like, holy mackerel, this is about the Moonies and Scientology and all these other cults. But it's completely describing my experience. It all of a sudden creates a frame, a healing frame, to get a handle on this incredible, topsy-turvy mind control experience.
Yeah. I mean, and when I finally found your book and I started reading it and then started understanding that, that universality that Yom talks about, that other people have gone through this, and meeting other people that have gone through it, and like not knowing that wasn't just the case for Illinois or Chicagoland or the Midwest, like globally, people have gone through the same exact scenario.
Right.
Really started to, that feeling of being alone started to kind of dissipate, and know that I wasn't abnormal. I wasn't just, a sucker, that I was actually victimized, and it was through a very polished and well developed manipulation system.
Right. And I think just understanding what a phobia is and how to cure the phobia and applying it, thinking back to all of the videos you were shown and all the booklets all the teachings about Armageddon and about, apostates or being so evil, etc. Just to be able to, it's like bubbles, you pop, as they rise up from your cult identity remnants, even though you're out, these things pop up and you can go, oh, that's a bubble. Bing! That's gone now. And you can rewire your brain so that you're not just, a victim of the Watchtower, but you're a survivor and even a thriver. That you're even stronger than you would have been if you had never had the experience, which is what we aim for in our work at Freedom of Mind, just to put a plug in. We really want people to really digest, integrate, take all the positives of their experience, and just be fully grounded, balanced people where the locus of control is in them, so that they can learn to trust themselves and have a toolbox of strategies and techniques and tools to manage the life, and how to also reality test other groups, other people, other churches, whatever, so that you don't walk around afraid that someone's going to it's going to happen again, or some triggers from some past negative experience will happen again. To be able to be empowered and say, no, I want to be in my body, in the now, in control, and living a fulfilling, happy life, helping other people, doing meaningful work and such. And I'm absolutely thrilled to know you also for my own reasons, because I'm 62, I want to pass this knowledge on, and you have the business experience of doing trainings. So you're actually helping me take my PowerPoints, take my videos, and create trainings to help people systematically understand what they need to know in order to most effectively help themselves recover, help family members and friends who may be in the group to start questioning, as well as to train mental health professionals and community members and such. So
I think,
thank you for your willingness
sure.
to be part of this growing movement, really, to try to say this is not an issue of religion, this is an issue of psychology, and the whole issue of undue influence and how people are programming, deceptively recruiting, indoctrinating, creating false selves that are dependent and obedient. And the good news is the human spirit wants to be free, and people want to real love, not conditional love. We'll love you if you go and do X number of hours of work, or we'll love you if you keep your mouth shut. Whatever. Just to love you as a being, as a healthy human being, for your uniqueness. So say a little bit more about what you want and what you think needs to happen more in our future work together.
Yeah, so I think it's that understanding and knowledge on other mental health professionals and medical professionals. Just from my own personal experience, working with several different people in the industry or in the field. You can see the business comes out a little occasionally.
It's okay.
So my whole goal, of undergraduate was to become a CEO, to lead a large, company and make money and do all this stuff. And then I started realizing that other people are going to go through the same experience that I've done it. And I don't think anyone should go through that same pain. And my whole purpose I can remember that Saturday afternoon just switched to, let's educate the world, or let's at least start with mental health professionals. Mm-hmm. And so that they understand that it's not just I've treated people that have been traumatized, it's fine, or I can do this or that. And then they end up, that client that comes to them, that person that's vulnerable, that's weak, that's in pain, is further sent down the wrong path of not being understood, not being validated. And so one of our big things that I think we're doing is educating people and letting people understand that there is a way to help people that have been in groups, and dismissing the group as just, that's your experience, or that was your, tale. Like, it's really, to that person, it further says, oh, I'm wrong again. So I was wrong in the group, and now here I am out saying that the group's, hurtful, and now they're just telling me that's still my fault. And so helping other professionals, and, I was lucky to have, a medical doctor tell me that I wasn't bipolar, because one of the psychiatrists diagnosed me with bipolar, and I'm just like, and now that I know the criteria, and now that I'm trained in how to diagnose, I'm like, how could you do that, not taking in the full...
Oh, it happens all the time. Bipolar, borderline personality disorder, so many misdiagnoses going on. And I guess the other thing I want to say is that I've heard from so many people who contacted me who said, I was in therapy for years and years, and I got tired of explaining to my therapist what my experience was and paying them to educate them about what cults are about. And I think they're absolutely right to be upset. They shouldn't have to, pay someone else to teach them what the therapist should be learning on their own, or paying for training. In order to do an ethical job. Because one of the criteria in mental health ethics is you shouldn't be working with people you're not trained to work with.
Oh.
And unfortunately, this has not been clear to all the psychiatrists and psychologists and social workers and mental health professionals. It's just, no matter how many talks I've done and other former members have done, it's changing. Because there are former members like yourself who become mental health professionals. They're doing their doctorates on the subject of cults and mind control. So it's the change is happening, but it's not happening fast enough. And
graduates will experience that. I would tell my professors, like, I want to help people that are survivors of cultic abuse, and they're like, what's a cult? Oh, they're not. Jehovah, that's not a cult, Steve. I'm like, okay, well, here's the criteria. Da, 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 and did you know that, you can't accept blood, that they have rules for how, married people can, have sex. They're called the bedroom laws. And they're like, wait, what? I'm like, yeah. So you don't know all this things that are happening behind the scenes, and then slowly educating them. So, but I would spend, the first day of most classes with most professors when we go around educating them.
Right.
So I can only imagine here I am vulnerable as a client coming to a professional that I'm paying, and
Right.
I'm sitting there for weeks on a time explaining it.
Right, exactly. And when you say don't take blood, you're talking about blood transfusions.
Yeah.
The leadership decided years ago that it's illegal and immoral and against the Bible to have a blood transfusion, even though every Jewish theologian that uses the scriptures that the Jehovah's Witnesses cite say that has nothing to do with blood transfusions, and the highest teaching of Torah is preserve life.
Mm-hmm.
It trumps everything else. Even a doctor on Shabbat is, sees somebody in pain or an animal in the ditch. You're obligated to help, even though it's work. The value is life and preservation of life. I understand from some former members that they're pressuring even 13 and 14-year-olds to argue legally. They're in a hospital. They're forcing them to say, I'm a mature adult and I don't want a blood transfusion. Horrifying to me. We have to get our politicians to uphold the law and protect children.
Yeah.
And pedophilia. We need to wrap up, but just say a little bit more about corporal punishment, because that's another theme I want to do a lot more on in the near future. But so you were spanked?
Oh, yeah. I mean,
you're smiling. Why are you smiling? You were...
so this is the time. So when we were younger, I mean, it wasn't. It was I mean, this is late '80s, '90s. In the Kingdom Hall, which is what we call the church or the buildings that they'd meet in,
right.
It wasn't uncommon that if you didn't sit, perfectly and look up every scripture, you went to the back and, got wailed on a few times. And then
what does that mean to be wailed on?
Like spanked.
With an open hand or with a paddle? Or
no,
what?
Typically at the Kingdom Hall, it was fine to do open hand. But I think, in most homes of the Jehovah's Witnesses, corporal punishment was more than accepted because it said, spare not the rod. And so myself, I have friends, we all got hit with various things from belts to, trees to curtain rods, various things. And then, even at the church, at the Kingdom Hall, it wasn't uncommon for somebody get hit with their, parents' belt. I experienced that on a routine basis. Funny story about that is, so my dad was giving they call them public talks on Sunday. It's a 45-minute discourse.
Yep.
So my dad would travel around and give talks, and my dad is giving a talk in the LaGrange congregation, and my littlest brother, Josh, is acting up, and my dad gets off stage, walks in the middle of his talk, gets off stage, takes off his belt, spanks Josh, gets back up on, puts his belt back on, and then goes back. And it was just normal. That was totally okay in the group for it to happen. And it was just, one of those funny experiences when we think back as a kid. We're like, but yeah, the group supports, even though their latest propaganda films have said they don't support corporal punishment, but they've, always quoted the scripture, spare not the rod, and emphasizing the rod.
Right. So much more to talk about, but I'm so happy that we're working together and that we want to change the world. You use the words. But,
Totally.
With ISIS and extremist recruitment happening online, with pimps and traffickers recruiting 14-year-old girls and boys and turning them into sex slaves for them and torturing them and beating them and branding them. The problem is epidemic, and everyone needs to understand the influence continuum, the bite model, to be able to reality test healthy versus unhealthy people as well as organizations. So thank you. Any last
Sure.
words as we wrap up?
So I think the biggest thing is that when you get out of a group and you think, oh, I'm in my 30s or I'm in 40s, and you're like, oh, I can't really do anything. Like, I just started the process of looking for a PhD program and I'm 30. So there's always time to do what you want to do. It doesn't have to limit you to just because you're this age doesn't mean you can't go back to school or you can't become this or you can't travel the world.
Oh, that's
Which the group,
huge. Your point is
help.
really huge. So many people are like, oh, I missed out on, and like life is over, even at 50 or even at 60.
Yeah.
I have a business consultant who's volunteered to help me. He got his master's from Harvard Business School when he was 85. He was a
That's all.
successful businessman. He was volunteering time helping other small business owners, and he was like, you know what? I'd like to check this out. I'd like to have an MBA, and he did it, and it's
That's awesome.
fantastic.
Yeah.
You're never too old, and you really just need to tune into who are you and what would really fulfill you. And I really respect and honor you as a successful person in the business world who said, you know what, I really think I want to do this and do a complete career shift. Except now we're using your expertise to help figure out how to do this whole teaching program, which is and therapy and coaching and consulting program. So thank you, and we'll do
Thank you.
more of this. And
All right.
check out Freedom of Mind and your bio, and you're available to do phones
Yep.
and other consulting. And take care. Thanks.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.